Today, we're going to touch on differentiating instruction. Differentiating is a long word to fingerspell. For our purposes, for this lesson, I will use the signed abbreviation DI to mean differentiating instruction. Does the idea of differentiating instruction for every single one of your students send you into a panic? Pretty much impossible to do, right? You'd never have a life outside of school. Believe me, you need a life outside of school. Let's see where DI takes us. Differentiating instruction goes hand in hand with universal design for learning. Firstly, both approaches focus on engagement. You'll recall from earlier that engagement taps into the affective network, the why of learning. What's the purpose? This is where we make efforts to develop the teacher-student relationship and to connect the student to the material at an emotional level. So you can see this parallels teaching approaches in UDL. Do you remember the 3 principles of UDL? Let's review. UDL Principle 1, multiple means of engagement. Those same principles apply directly to DI. How does DI fit in? You consider the characteristics of the students in your classroom by tapping into their individual interests. UDL Principle 2, multiple means of representation. You remember that from last week? With this principle, you are differentiating your instruction by providing representations of the information and knowledge in various ways that consider the diverse learning styles of the students in your classroom. UDL Principle 3, multiple means of actions and expression. Providing students different options to demonstrate their learning. We want to provide our students with multiple options and opportunities to demonstrate what they have experienced and learned. Research shows there is a close relationship between students' experiences of engagement and student learning. Engagement and learning are strongly linked. Universal design is trying to motivate students to engage in learning by showing the relevance, why learning the material matters. Once they understand why it matters, they become much more interested in the topic. It falls to you as the teacher and the resources used to stimulate that motivation. In universal design, we want to try creative ideas to purposefully pique the curiosity of the students and stimulate interest. The DI components for this are student interest, student readiness, willingness to accept something challenging, and process. We'll explore how UDL interfaces with DI. As teachers, we want to consider in what ways we can give our students choice and autonomy. As teachers, we want to deeply reflect on how to make learning relevant to the expected range of students' interests and needs. We want to think about the ways the classroom dynamics are playing out. Is it positive, accepting, and supportive of the diversity of students in the room? What have you seen or done in the classroom that has led to student engagement? There are so many options. Differentiated instruction relies on the fact that you know your students. A common practice is to teach the way we were taught or our preferred way of learning. Admittedly, that's a particular challenge for me because I was isolated. I was an independent learner. I didn't like group work. I didn't like small group discussions. I didn't want to work with partners. I much preferred to do everything myself by myself. We can't project our expectations onto our students. They will come with their own behaviors and interests. We must get to know what these are, get to know who they are. My husband is so different from me. He loves to engage with other people. He enjoys working in teams. He is not motivated to complete tasks on his own. So then I have to get involved so things actually get finished. You have to intentionally reflect on the range of diversity in your students. You will have a range. You'll have students who are independent learners that hate group work. That was my oldest daughter. She hated group work. She would complain constantly about her group and only wanted to come home and do it all herself. My youngest daughter loved group work, but in her case, she would only do the work if she liked her teacher. My oldest daughter was more like me in motivation and learning style. By understanding the student's characteristics, learning styles, interests, and beyond, you are far better prepared to incorporate effective DI that will engage all of them. One approach to effective engagement is to consider what barriers may interfere with students' engagement. Walking into the classroom, having a look around, concluding, no barriers here, will not aid your cause. We all really need to think deeply about this. First thing to consider, what is the activity or the concept you want to work on? Then consider the complexity or difficulty of that concept. Is it beyond them? Too easy for them? These factors need to be analyzed. Analyzing complexity and readiness to learn a concept or to do an activity has to consider these dimensions: cognitive processing, linguistic abilities, auditory capabilities, physical movement, and concentration ranges. You can help your analyses using a scale of red means hard, yellow is a good fit, green is too easy. As an example, once I received curriculum resources in my classroom, I begin by looking at the text. Then I consider the reading and linguistic skills of each of my students and consider whether the resource is red, yellow, or green. If it's not yellow, then I will make modifications. I may rewrite it or search for other resources that would work for their individual needs. Another possible barrier to engagement and learning could be the classroom schedule. Generally, teachers, elementary or high school teachers, tend to consider the schedule as out of their control. And this is true to some extent. But consider the student's ability to learn and feel motivated if all 5 periods are heavy-duty courses. This is truly a substantial barrier. If we can schedule their learning demands to alternate between heavier and lighter demands with each period, they're more likely to have the endurance and energy to last the day. It's surprising how many students are impacted negatively by the school schedule. This slide shows a sample of the day's schedule for one student. It begins with a morning meeting, then shared reading time. The reading would require the student to use cognitive skills to read for meaning. Next is shared writing, again taxing cognitive skills, but this task also includes discussions with peers, engaging communication skills, among others. Next, they move on to independent writing. Now they have to assimilate all the discussion and feedback from the group work to compose something independently. This is very demanding on cognitive skills. Next is a math class, presumably a new math concept requiring students to engage cognitive skills to follow formulae, understand which equations to apply for which problem. Now let's consider a DI example for scheduling. Our adorable young man is Aiden. He has ADHD. So beyond differentiating instruction, we need to overlay universal design for learning. So what do we do about Aiden? We know he learns from hands-on experiences. So in our previous schedule, where exactly were the hands-on experience activities? We know he struggles to stay on task for anything longer than 3 minutes. How well is he going to do during the shared reading, shared writing, and independent writing tasks, which typically require a great deal of concentration? We also know he has weak organizational skills. Where in the schedule does he have time to organize himself? The day has multiple and overlapping demands. Let's consider what these are. For the writing demands, he needs to organize himself with the right kind and enough paper. The books they may be using to draw some of their ideas from. Cognitively, he needs to organize his thought into sentences and paragraphs. It's a crazy schedule for Aiden. We know that he tends to squirm at his desk. This usually indicates the student needs to move around. We also know he is friendly, helpful, and has a great sense of humor. He's a talker and often interrupts others. We know he often forgets to bring his homework home and forgets to bring it back to school. If he is reminded to take it home, it's not likely to come back. He is constantly misplacing things, forgets where he puts things down. He is popular with his peers and plays on many school sports teams. I have taught deaf students with ADHD, and these characteristics are bang on. It can be challenging. For my student, he never ate breakfast in the morning, so I always had some sort of breakfast ready for him when he got to school. Once he had eaten, we could start to work. He could never find his papers or his work. His desk was a rat's nest. So my strategy was to only ever give him one worksheet or one page of reading at a time. Once he was done with the work, then he would give it back to me and I would give him the next task. I never gave him a stack of work. The assignments he was given were short and sweet, nothing lengthy. Tests were limited to 3 questions. Reading was limited to 1 paragraph at a time. After an interval, I would give him another paragraph. I was always looking for projects and activities where he could use his hands. I considered ideas that would link back to the activities in English class. For example, he participated in building a set for our performance at the Globe Theatre, which he thoroughly enjoyed. I was looking for ideas for models or other things he could build. The downside to this schedule is that 30 minutes into building something, the school bell would ring and he would need to go to his next class. So the main point is to think about whether the schedule is a barrier given the characteristics the student brings to the learning tasks. Consider barriers to healthy emotional responses and interaction. You have to be the detective that observes their behavior, how feelings may be expressed through their behavior. We have something called the zone of regulation. The blue zone represents feeling tired, low energy, and so on. The green zone represents feeling focused and ready to learn. The yellow zone represents feelings of frustration, worry, silliness, excitement, and so on. The red zone represents feelings of anger, fear, etc. So, as you observe the students in your class, can you identify the zone they are each in? I had a deaf student who I would greet every day as he came into the classroom with a "Good morning, how are you?" Every single day he would say he was tired. Every day he said the same exact thing. So I had to try to interpret what was really going on. Was he depressed? Was he not getting enough sleep? Was he feeling hopeless? This was the same student I told you about last week who was skipping math class. He skipped many classes though. He said it was because he was tired. Sometimes he would go home at noon to sleep. I was trying to figure out how to re-engage him with learning. Honestly, he was functioning like an old man, slumped over, moving slowly, always tired. Well, I knew that one of his interests was movies, so I decided to do a unit on movies, including the techniques of filming, such as camera angles for shots. Making a movie requires determining themes and many more aspects to the plot. As he got into the unit, he became more and more engaged. With that came an effort to do some work. He ended up passing English. To pass English, he had to also read other books and complete tasks. But the hook that got him engaged was the movie making unit, as well as the fact that I was teaching him an ASL. So a direct relationship with his teacher. It became clear that he was suffering from extreme cognitive overload from trying to understand new material through speech reading. For the green zone, you won't find many students in the green zone. There may be some. Students do struggle with all manner of things that puts them out of the green zone. Maybe the same was true for you, or perhaps you were most often in the green zone when in school. Students in the green zone feel calm, happy, safe, focused, and ready to learn. In truth, not many people land there. The yellow zone describes students who may be worried about what happened at home or upset about problems with friends or excited about the weekend. Students who feel a loss of control, acting out of sorts, also fall into this zone. Red zone students may be feeling angry, scared. You may see yelling or fighting, or they could be elated, another extreme emotion. Students who are out of control. It's hard when these feelings surface, but you will see it in the classroom. You'll need strategies to help them get back under control. Co-regulation is a strategy where you regulate them and they regulate themselves. In the old days, students were just left to their own devices. Luckily today, we support the student through co-regulation. The student needs to learn how to regulate themselves, their behaviors, to be ready to learn, and we support them, guide them, and help them to regulate their behaviors. I had a student who picked on others in our class, a real bully. We were a small class, so each of the students had been victims of his bullying. I asked him to stop, but he just ignored me. I scolded him, but he didn't stop either. I ignored him, left him alone. He still wouldn't stop. Nothing I did made a difference. Then I decided to have a group discussion. We all sat in a circle and I asked the students to share how they felt when he picked on them. And they did share. They talked about how much it hurt, how it made them feel angry, how he made them feel bad about themselves. Each student took it in turns to share their feelings. The bully listened to each of them and recognized that they all felt the same way and were experiencing the same hurtful feelings. After that, there was a shift in his behavior. That's co-regulation. He had a role and I had a role in regulating his behavior. Some students will need to be taught how to regulate themselves. Another barrier to engagement for students is the hidden curriculum. The hidden curriculum is your curriculum, your classroom rules, expectations around student behavior, social skills, strategies, and other expectations. These are your expectations that have not been overtly communicated. So the students have to figure them out, have to figure you out and what you want. That can be tricky for some students. Some students just don't catch on to the hidden curriculum. They can't figure it out. To be clear, we all have hidden curriculums. They operate in every classroom and in the school at large. Those expectations that are not clearly laid out, but still exist. Most students will figure them out, but some won't. As an example, when I was growing up, the hidden curriculum around me was to become a good farm kid. That meant we had to be active, play hockey, be good at basketball, as well as baseball. Everyone would drive to the coulee and go drinking on Friday nights. That was the hidden curriculum when I was growing up. And if you didn't do those things, you were a loser. The hidden curriculum shows what is valued. It's figuring out what the teacher thinks is important. My teachers never talked about this hidden curriculum, what it means to be a farm kid, but those values and expectations were definitely there. The child has to navigate the hidden curriculum for each classroom. That one teacher doesn't care about a certain behavior like spitting in a garbage can, but another teacher does mind. Some teachers will talk to students about topic X, and other teachers will not touch it with a 10-foot pole. Students need to figure out the differences among their teachers' hidden values, beliefs, expectations, teaching approaches, and how they handle students. So students too have to get to know us to figure out our inconsistencies and navigate various hidden curriculums. It's the things that are never discussed. How to minimize this barrier is to try to articulate your own hidden curriculum to them. In your mind, it might be obvious, but some students might not be able to figure it out. In my class, rule number 1 was no bullying. Another was that in our classroom, we follow the norms of behavior for deaf culture and ASL. That would not be the expectations of other classrooms. So we need to take the time to clarify what the expectations and differences are for each setting. I would explain the exact expectations for deaf culture norms for my room. I would go on to say how the expectations in the hearing classroom, working with interpreters, would have different expectations of the student. Breaking this down for students so they understood situational differences and expectations helped them transition and engage in each classroom. Another strategy to encourage engagement is to allow the students choice and autonomy. Make learning, activities, exercises, and so on relevant to students' needs and interests, allowing the student some choice. One example of this strategy to engage the students is to allow students to choose assignments that interest them, or provide them with a choice from a list. I would make a choice table with 4 to 9 assignment choices and post it on a board. I would explain each one so the student could make an informed choice. The number of options is up to you. So the students have some time to consider each choice before deciding. Sometimes you might ask them to complete 2 or more assignments, but they still get to choose. So one strategy is the choice board. These choice boards can relate to exercises that might reinforce skills-based tasks, like the one you see here on the slide. Here's another example of providing them a choice of deadlines to hand in their completed work. You can allow the student to choose the modalities, with which to complete their assignments. Options include presentations, spoken or signed, written representations, drawings, performance, skit, dance, and so on. They can be creative in their choices, so give them a choice of modalities. In this choice board, food unit, all the activities are designed to explore and to practice new skills. How many squares they need to complete is up to you, but generally I ask them to complete 3. Each activity is completed in the language of instruction. If the lesson is in English, then their work product is in English. If the lesson was conducted in ASL, then their work could be presented in ASL. If it was for a French lesson, the same holds true. Their work should be in the language of instruction. An additional approach to encourage engagement is to provide students with strategies for learning. Remember, one size does not fit all. Some students may really benefit from a certain strategies, while others pretty much hate it. So you'll need a selection of strategies to support students' learning of new material. This slide has a brief description of some strategies for learning. The RAFTS, RAFTS strategy is meant to guide students' writing composition and reading comprehension. Two others are the jigsaw strategy and the literature circle strategy, which helps students in novel studies. The other one on this slide is the orbital studies strategy. Strategy resources are plentiful. Student engagement can be encouraged by offering options for students to work in groups, in pairs, or alone. When students can choose which activity to complete, they develop autonomy. It encourages initiative and independence. They feel empowered. If students can show what they know, then you have addressed their learning needs and made it fun. They recognize how learning is relevant to them. If students can choose between working alone or with others, you are addressing their need for belonging. At the same time, you are encouraging their interests and addressing their learning needs. Based on research, Schlechte developed this levels of engagement table that covers the attention range from diverted attention to high attention. This represents no commitment to high commitment, linked to associated levels ranging from rebellion to high engagement. Another researcher published on the 7 things that happen when students own their learning. Number 1, they fall in love with learning. Number 2, they embrace a maker's mindset, which means that they look to the real world to make things. They are curious to try new things, be hands-on with tools and creating things. They like to experiment. They connect to real-world objects. Number 3, they develop iterative thinking. As they learn new things, they circle back to what was known earlier and expand their thinking and understanding, and continue in this process of learning and improving understanding. Number 4, they become self-starters. They no longer need someone looking over their shoulder, prodding them along in their learning. Number 5, they become problem solvers and systems thinkers. Systems thinkers can take a step back and identify the root of the problem and analyze possible solutions. Number 6, they also challenge the system. Not all systems respond as they should and need to be challenged and changed. These people have learned how to challenge the system. Number 7, and perhaps the most important finding, they become architects of their own learning. As teachers, this is what we want. We want students to love learning. It reminds me of a student I had. He struggled with reading and writing, but at some point he had found the world of YouTube. And every lunch hour, he would watch all manner of YouTube videos which related to the problems or situations he was dealing with. While at the same time I was trying things in the classroom, he was bringing these videos to my attention. He was taking control of his own learning. We know that it's important to move from compliance to student engagement. Look for ways to empower your students to own their learning. That's the ultimate goal. Be creative. Consider how you can provide students choice and autonomy. Develop materials and resources that address your students' learning needs and with which they can relate. Finally, endeavor to create an environment that is supportive of all students.